The file begins. Winter 2026 brought not snow, but the cold ash of shattered hopes. This was not a collapse, but anatomy of a fall, unfolding in slow motion. The cryptocurrency market, already volatile, shuddered from the echo of the dollar hawk disaster. Millions of dollars, once promising digital freedom, turned to dust, burying thousands of investors. Their cries, silent in the digital realm, echoed in emptied bank accounts. Pin pause. The average loss per token holder was $8,000, a figure capable not just of shaking, but of utterly destroying someone's life. Hailey Welch, the unacknowledged godmother of this scam, found herself at the center of the storm. Waves of anger, disappointment, and outright hatred crashed upon her with unprecedented force. This was not merely a financial failure. It was a betrayal of faith, wrenched from beneath the feet of those who saw her as a guide to new easy wealth. Now they saw only the ruins of an empire, built on castles in the air and others' illusions. The question was not who was to blame, but who would pay. The answer, as always, was simple and brutal. Those who believed would pay. And her? Her name became synonymous with digital ruin, a ruin that smelled of the grave. This was just the prologue. It would get worse. The subsequent weeks of 2026 were marked by one characteristic detail: absence. Hailey Welch had vanished. No podcasts, no cameras, no bold pronouncements, just silence, punctuated only by the hum of growing public outrage. This was exile, voluntary or enforced, but inevitable. The media, like a pack of hungry dogs, tore at her past, searching for another skeleton in the closet, another fatal flaw. Every detail of her biography, from childhood anecdotes to peculiar DNA test results, was now scrutinized under a microscope with a single purpose: to explain the inexplicable. How did a woman who promised mountains of gold become the architect of a digital coffin? The demand for answers transformed into a demand for justice. Lawyers, like vultures, circled the ruins, gathering class action lawsuits. Pause. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Securities and Exchange Commission, previously merely expressing interest, were now rumored to have launched a full-scale investigation, despite Welch's prior claims of all charges dropped. Trust, fragile and ephemeral, had been shattered. Those who had invested their last savings now stared into the void, their eyes filled not with anger, but with a bottomless, cold sadness. This was not simply a loss of money. It was a loss of faith in the future, in the easy path, in a new star. And while Hailey Welch remained out of reach, her silence only amplified the sense that there was more to this downfall than mere naivete or bad advice. The shadow of a bunker or a gilded cage? The answer remained in the shadow. But the investigation was just beginning. It reached roots deeper than stock market reports, to the very moment when the dust had not yet settled on the ruins, but was only rising from beneath the feet. The story of Hailey Welch, before she became currency, was a chronicle of search. A search in the void where others found family. She was born in shadow. Her mother, lost in a chemical fog, left her only the fact of her birth, etched in cold medical reports. Crack baby, this brand. Invisible yet palpable. Through years of orphanage, through a system that grinds souls, Hailey survived. Her childhood, not a photo album, but a collection of scars. A search for belonging, a search for a name she finally found in the digital ether. The phone screen became her confessional, And social media, a new reality where she could rebuild herself, where every like is a brick in the foundation of a new, invented self. She became a voice, a face, but not her own, a mask. And then, on one ordinary evening, a glitch in the matrix occurred. A nonsensical phrase thrown into the microphone. Hawk Tua. A crude, almost primal expression of desire. And this accident, this acoustic artifact, became the key. Pause. Millions of views. An explosion. From obscurity to meme, from shadow to the spotlight, which burned out her previous life. In a few days, she became Hawk Tua Girl. She herself turned into a commodity. Digital fame, like a drug, promised everything, and took everything that remained. The broadcast was her new currency, a new persona forged from memes and thousands of reposts, demanded capitalization. Fame, as is well known, is a perishable commodity. The inventory of sins had not yet begun, but the inventory of opportunities was already in full swing. Merchandise, t-shirts, mugs, slogans. First, timid, then increasingly brazen advertising integrations. Her voice, once simply a voice from the crowd, now sold. It sold everything that could be sold. At this stage, her capital, according to analysts, reached $500,000. An unexpected, almost fairy tale rise. But these were merely crumbs. On the horizon loomed a new El Dorado, the gold rush of the new century, cryptocurrency. A world where numbers on a screen promise not just wealth, but immediate, almost magical transformation. Where anyone, even the most inexperienced player, could become king. This world beckoned not only to the desperate, but also to those who had already tasted fame, but craved more. More control, more power, or simply more zeros in their account. Influencers like new preachers began to speak of blockchain, of decentralization, of financial freedom. They carried the good news of easy money, and their flock, already accustomed to trusting them on matters of style and lifestyle, was ready to listen, ready to invest. Pause. Ready to follow their digital idol into any abyss where golden mountains were promised. This was not just business, it was religion. In this wavering, treacherous time, when faith in digital salvation reached its apex, the idea of Dollar Hawk emerged. Something more than just a currency. It was a symbol, a personal token, tied to a name, to an image, to that very Hailey Welch, whose fleeting fame was now to gain material embodiment in the blockchain. The idea did not come from her herself. It came from the shadows, from a friend of a friend, as would later be said. A man with shining eyes, and even more shining, but empty promises. He spoke of decentralization, of community, that this was not just an investment, but a revolution, a chance for everyone to become part of something great. And of course, rich. Pause, very rich. For Hailey Welch, this was not just another contract. It was a chance to solidify her status, to turn a fleeting meme into an eternal legacy, to multiply those modest 500,000 that already lay in her account. The marketing campaign was aggressive, almost religious. Social networks burned with posts, urging to soar with the hawk. Exclusive NFTs were promised, access to private communities, even a share in future projects. It was not just token promotion. It was the sale of a dream of easy money, of belonging to a new digital elite, a dream packaged in a bright wrapper beneath which hid only emptiness. And this emptiness, as it should, lured millions. It lured them with promises, requiring no effort except one, faith. And they believed, too much, too blindly. empire built on promises cannot stand firm. Hawk, this digital mirage, reached its zenith in December 2024. It was a moment of triumph when charts soared upwards and investors, blinded by the glint of easy profit, poured in their last savings. But this was not organic growth. This was a meticulously planned, almost mechanical pump. The numbers that were meant to represent value were merely reflections of manipulation. A delicate web of deals, unseen flows of funds, creating an illusion of demand. It was a classic scheme, as old as time itself, but adapted for the new digital reality. And when the illusion reached its peak, when every last trusting investor was drawn into the vortex, the invisible hand pulled the trigger. In one day. Pause in 24 hours. The value of Hawk plummeted by more than 95%. Millions of dollars dissolved into thin air. The digital coffin was nailed shut. Those who believed in the Hawk found themselves at the bottom of a chasm. Their investments turned to dust. Lawsuits began against the fund managing the operations. And though Hailey Welch's name was not among the direct accusations, the shadow of this catastrophe fell upon her. She spoke of betrayal, of being deceived herself. But in the anatomy of the fall, in the post-mortem audit of this shattered dream, her role was central. She was the face, the voice, the banner of this disaster. Crippled lives, empty accounts, a bitter testament to the digital gold rush, where gold turned out to be mere gilding on the concrete of deceit. A bitter testament to the digital gold rush, where gold turned out to be mere gilding on the concrete of deceit. Though federal agencies had for a time closed their files, declaring Hailey Welch cleared of criminal wrongdoing, the civil courts operate on a different cadence, a slower, more methodical grind. The initial class action lawsuits, first aimed at the foundation, soon expanded. The names on the plaintiff's roster grew their collective rage, a palpable force investors stripped bare. Now sought not just restitution, but answers and a face to hold accountable. Her face legal strategists, for the victims, a cohort of hungry, sharp-suited men and women, began their inventory of sins. Subpoenas flew landing like cold steel on desks. Depositions stretched for days, turning the air in sterile conference rooms, thick with unspoken accusations. The defense of phalanx of high-priced legal talent worked to distance Welch from the operational mechanics of the plummeting coin. They painted her as a victim of misplaced trust, a charismatic figurehead, perhaps naive but never malicious yet. Discovery, the ruthless excavation of digital breadcrumbs, emails, encrypted chats, contracts signed in Heist meeting minutes, where warnings were logged, then dismissed. The cold, hard facts began to accumulate, each document a tiny fragment in the anatomy of a systemic failure. One particular exhibit, a memorandum outlining a revised token distribution scheme, just weeks before the collapse, bore a curious annotation. A single initial, HW, the question in the hushed courtrooms shifted, not if she was a master manipulator, but if she was a knowing accomplice to a colossal gamble, or merely a useful idiot, blinded by the glare of the spotlight and the promise of easy wealth. The whispers began in the periphery, then grew into a low hum. The truth, often, is not found in public statements, but in whispered confessions, in the cold light of immunity deals. The legal pressure, a relentless, tightening vice, began to crack the facade of loyalty. Former associates, technicians who built the digital scaffolding, even a disgruntled junior partner from the foundation, began to talk. One such individual, identified only as Source Delta in the court documents, painted a stark picture of the operation's inner sanctum. He spoke of the friend of a friend, a shadowy figure named Victor, who presented the dollar hawk concept with an almost religious fervor. A man who promised not just wealth, but an empire built on clicks and hype. Source Delta detailed meetings where concerns about market saturation and unsustainable tokenomics were raised, only to be met with dismissive laughter. Hailey Welch, he claimed under oath, was not merely a figurehead, she was present, she asked questions. And crucially, she signed off on key marketing strategies that intentionally downplayed risks, leveraging her viral persona to create an irresistible, albeit false, sense of security. Pause. The digital breadcrumbs became a trail of damning evidence. Leaked internal communications, presented under seal, revealed a private chat where Welch expressed excitement about the inevitable surge, even as internal projections showed volatility. A specific audio recording, purportedly from a private strategy session, captured her voice discussing maximizing early investor sentiment before a planned reevaluation of the token's value, the cold, hard calculation of risk versus reward, and the ultimate pause price. For thousands, it was financial ruin. For Hailey Welch, it was the slow public dissection of her carefully constructed reality. Deep sigh, low gravelly voice, slow pacing, her meticulously constructed reality. The shell of her digital empire, once solid, began to crack. Brands that rushed to associate themselves with the viral phenomenon were now swiftly distancing themselves. Advertising contracts, once bringing six-figure sums, vanished into the air like cigarette smoke on a rainy night. Pause. Orders for merchandise, adorned with symbols once amusing, now leaving only a bitter aftertaste, dried up. Public opinion, fickle and cruel, turned away. Her name, once a password to instant attention, became a brand. Attempts to explain herself, aired on her own podcast, only fanned the flames, casting her as either a naive victim or a calculating manipulator trying to save face. The crowd at VidCon, once adoring her, now represented an uncontrollable mass of accusations and mockery. This was not just public humiliation. This was pause exile. Federal agents whose shadows loomed in her past no longer seemed so harmless. An investigation, which she claimed revealed nothing, left behind invisible scars. Every glance, every message, every comment became part of a collective verdict. Her fame, her money, her influence, all of it turned to dust, to cold, lifeless dust on the side of the digital highway. Epilogue. The autopsy revealed not only the causes of the fall, but also laid bare the anatomy of an entire era. The Hailey Welch case is not just a personal tragedy. It's a bitter testament, written in the ink of digital gold and human greed. It's an inventory of the sins of a generation convinced that viral fame equates to expertise, and follower count guarantees truth. The story of Shock, the wreckage of an empire built on hype and promises, became a textbook. A textbook on how easily tinsel's gleam can overshadow common sense, on how responsibility, like gravity, acts relentlessly even in virtual space. Pause. The digital grave. Hailey Welch's reputation landed in wasn't dug by her hands alone. It was dug by everyone who believed in easy money, everyone who closed their eyes to obvious risks, everyone who liked without asking a question. Her mangled fate is not an exception, but a warning. A warning about the fragility of fame, the treachery of quick money, and that even the brightest internet stars can turn out to be mere meteors, burning out in the atmosphere of public condemnation. Hailey Welch's legacy isn't her viral catchphrase, but the shadow of the bunker where millions of dollars evaporated, leaving behind only the ash of disappointment and the echo of unasked questions. It's the final verdict on the illusion that digital permissiveness can exist without real, pause consequences.